good news, this last one. My Catch the CS Principals fever is the coup de grace data activity I do before turning my students loose on the data portfolio task. And one way to think of this is it's kind of who's in the box with a little bit of scale added to it. I say this because here I rigged a data set. So in the who's in the box, I'm doing 10 or less little clothespins. In this project, I have created a little playground, a data set with 1,000 records. Now, don't think that this is a big data set. A data set of 1,000 records isn't even big enough to be called a big data set. It's not even big enough to be called a baby bear data set in the world of data management. But it's big enough to let your students appreciate the power of thinking with a little bit of scale and bringing some data analysis tools to bear on a set of information. So here's the story. The students need to save the world. I have found especially that my female students in the principal's class tend to like this exercise. So the storyline is zombies are invading the world and the students are given a data set and they need to mine this data set to try and figure out who patient 0 is, what the viral agent is, etc. Now, we have promised to maintain this data set publicly accessible for at least 5 years. So if you want to play with this playground, you won't be exposed. I'm not going to walk away and leave you hanging. So along with giving you this playground, I will give you all the activity sheets that I've created. They grow. So the first kind of activity is a tickle, and then by the end, they are trying to identify a viral agent. I also give you an answer key to all the little worksheets and a schema for the students so they get a little tech spec that has all the attributes provided in the data set. I also give you a list of all the relationships that were intentionally baked into the data set. One of the things I found is every semester I run this, the students find a relationship that I go validate. It's really in there. It was not my intent to put it in. That's part of the magic of mining a data set. So here was what I was thinking when I made this activity. I do a lot of STEM outreach, and I go to schools that don't have an internet connection, and I have to run this kind of unplugged where the students just come up with the problems, and then with my PC, I turn it into questions against the data set. So there's still a lot of value running that way. Hopefully, ideally, your students would be able individually, in pairs and in teams, to tickle the data set themselves, and you really will enjoy the data platform, the Google data platform that Dr. Gray walked you through in the data unit, because I say this as somebody that's taught this unit for years in Excel and Access. Now we have one ring to rule them all. You don't have to import and export data between Excel and Access. You can do all the work right there in that one platform, so that will cut down on your teaching time. One of the things that I really like about database work is that all database packages with which I'm familiar, and I work in, I think, all of them, except the maybe high-level, dedicated enterprise-level ones. I might not have touched all of those, but all the others have a GUI layer that turns programming into an abstraction. And that really stretches our understanding of what abstraction is. What do I mean by that? There is a cute little GUI in which the students drag and drop, and they are saying, you know, I highlight this attribute, like weight, and I want it to be greater than 120. You know, print out all the records that match that. And you can switch over to a view where you can see the magic fairies. Database fairies come and they construct a piece of programming code in SQL, structured query language, and you can switch between the views. I also, at least one point in the semester, you'll see in one of the activity sheets, I have the students take a stab at writing, at least in pseudocode, the programming behind a query, even beyond SQL. So you want to kind of make all those connections wherever you can. Because the GUI is so delightful, the user interface is so delightful, so friendly, you can have students up and running with some pretty darn complicated queries, I promise you, in 5 minutes. So I hope you will get brave into it and dive into that. Here are the sorts of questions that students answer in the provided worksheet. So there's kind of a pre-game tickle. What kind of data do you hope to find in the data set? You've been called in, you're part of a task force to save the world. What do you hope against hope you're going to have access to? And what kind of factors might have dictated what did really make it into the data set? So you may or may not know that in the US, our Center for Disease Control, the CDC, gathers input from medical personnel around the country, and they upload information on a 2-week cycle usually, and so there's some lag between when medical events were happening and when they get reported and when the CDC can mine them. So ideas around time and cost and medical theory, I had no idea that wearing the color blue could cause you to get infected. Who knew? So I wasn't tracking that kind of information. So you want them to start making guesses in advance about what the data set hopefully contains. The actual tickle, I have them look at the provided schema, because if your students are anything like mine, if I give them 3 or 4 pages of here's the data that's in the data set, they are not going to read that. So I want them to get the idea of a technical spec and preparing, and hopefully they will see some of the data sets and guess at some of the patterns. I'll tell you right off the bat, there's a kind of sort and hidden at the end attribute on what grade did you get in the CS Principles course? And if you got a C or higher, you have automatic total immunity to the zombie contagion. So there's some humor that I've added in there. So anyway, the tickle is, go read the schema, identify 3 questions you want to explore. So for example, does immunity go with military background? Or if you worked in the medical field, are you immune? Are you more likely to get infected? The other thing I have them do is using built-in functions, go calculate those measures of central tendency and measures of dispersion for age. That will hopefully get their little thinking juices going about more complicated relationships that might exist within the data set. This is a contagion, and so I try to keep things active and busy by sending in news bulletins as well as little pieces of information from the CDC. So one of the things, just to reinforce the internet unit, is we get a little message that the zombies have taken over Command Central. The data set might be suspect. Very quickly, let's talk about how we might authenticate information from the CDC, etc. And then now we're back on track to the data unit. When we do data mining, there are worksheets that have them identify who patient 0 is. And this is a fun way of putting somebody who it's just a natural for them to run the queries with somebody who might have more domain content in biology or who might have just more common sense. Is patient 0 likely to be the person with the earliest recorded time for reporting inside the data set? So you could do a quick function on the time column when reported, and you could turn up who you think patient 0 is. But in real world, is it the first person who walked in? No. Different people would go get medical help sooner than others. So we want to teach them to continually be thinking about the data and what it means. I ask them to start creating charts for their little exploration. So one of the things that I do, because of these relationships were baked in as easy and categorical relationships, give me a pivot chart on the relationship between age and immunity. Give me a pivot chart between military background and immunity. So now we aren't just doing the portfolio task cold, rather we have some practice with mining the data and producing a pivot chart. The activity sheets that I give them keep growing in complexity. You could stop kind of at any moment. One activity that you need to have them do is, after they've mined the data, I give them information, a little bio brief on 5 possible viral agents: virus A, virus B, virus C. And they have to choose who they think the viral agent was. And again, to keep them in that cone of uncertainty, the real one we all have to live in, at least 2 of the viral agents meet the logic puzzles that I've given them in the activity sheets. And so you got to gamble. So we have a little class debate where teams push their favorite candidate and we take a vote. And so at the end, once we have chosen a viral agent, I give them a card that says, there's good news and bad news. The CDC for viral agent C, the one that we're convinced is at the root cause of the zombie breakout. I have a stash today of so many little hypodermic needles fully loaded with the immunization, but they're located in, I don't know, East Cupcake, and it's going to take this amount of time, and I can only save, in the first wave, I can only save this many people. Who are you going to save? So we have a classroom debate around who they would pick and why. And I shared in the highlight introduction that every semester the students will choose to save people in K-12, because that's the bright and creative youth of America. They write off college professors. Depending on the age group, they may or may not protect government leaders, or they might lop them off in the first wave. So this also kind of reinforces the idea that the stewardship of computer science is actionable. These students will have to grow up and remap the world to digital ethics. They will hopefully vote, craft policy, etc. And this isn't just, hey, this was interesting, or no, it wasn't. We want them to get in the practice of seeing these ideas as rich with a vibrancy and it matters dimension. So for me, the zombie activity has been really, really fruitful. Who doesn't want to save the world, and who doesn't like a great zombie? You will be able to find many additional resources around zombie contagion. Texas Instruments has some free stuff if you're running in a community where they have access to nice calculators. There are some free materials and extra exercises. The CDC has little zombie kits you can download, etc. So you can have a lot of fun with this. I hope you will run the zombie exercise, and in the resource section you can find all the materials that I spoke to, and Dr. Gray knows how to reach me if you have any questions or you want me to work with you in getting this up and running.